Sports Professor Rick Horrow, and welcome to the Icons Leadership in Sports. Every month we go inside the industry to focus on a leader who's successful not only on the field, but in the boardroom as well. This month, the person who started the tennis and figure skating divisions at IMG, Bob Kain. First, let's go inside the icon. Bob Kain graduated from the University of Virginia in 1971, where he lettered 4 years in tennis. Less than 5 years later, he was hired by IMG to build their tennis business, representing legendary names like McEnroe, Sampras, Federer, Evert, Sharapova, and the Williams sisters during his career. In 1984, he created and built IMG's figure skating business, which included the creation of the Stars on Ice Tour with Scott Hamilton. Kain developed the 280-acre IMG Academy in Bradenton, which is the largest elite sports training academy in the world. He was named president and COO of IMG North and South America in the 1990s and president and co-CEO in 2003. He retired from IMG in 2006. Since retirement, Kain has worked for the Cleveland Browns, helped Randy Lerner buy Premier League club Aston Villa, created the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission, and now serves on the Executive Committee of the USGA. Some retirement. Kain's one serious hobby is golf, +1 handicap, and competed in 4 U.S. Senior Amateur Championships. Kain is married to 1984 Olympic figure skating silver medalist Rosalind Sumners. He has 2 sons, including Tucker Kain, who's the Chief Strategy and Growth Officer at Fanatics. So you started IMG in 76. And at the end of the day, you had created skaters, Stars on Ice with Scott Hamilton, IMG Fashion, the tennis business, the golf business was the model. But you took, obviously with Mark and everybody else, IMG from the world leader into the intergalactic leader. Talk a little bit about that.
But when I got there in 76, I probably was the 30th or 40th executive, second or third in tennis. So, and tennis was a little $500,000 business, and we decided to try and grow it. So I got there at the right time. Tennis was just starting to get great and take off, and we had an unbelievable run. And the fun thing for me was golf was already doing great, and I got to do tennis and do the fashion and do the IMG Academy and do the skating. I got to do all these other things and watch the whole company grow like crazy and be a part of that growth. So, I mean, I'll give you one example. Tennis was a $600,000 business my first year, and 20 years later, it was a $100 million business. So I just got on a rocket ship and held on tight, and Mark and all the guys thought I must be pretty smart, but tennis was good to me.
Well, tennis was good to you, but managerial and entrepreneurialism was also good for you. When you left IMG or retired, 3,000 people, 61 offices, 30 countries, 100,000 individual clients, 1,000 events, 10,000 hours of programming. That doesn't happen overnight. It's a plan, and you guys created something that nobody ever has before or since, right?
Yeah, I think that is right, and it was fun because we were the trailblazers. As Mark, McCormick was an interesting guy because he was a visionary. So he did the 100,000 foot ceiling version pretty well, but he was also a very detailed lawyer on the ground, and he kind of taught the rest of us. And there were about 10 of us that were there from the very early days, and we stuck together, which I think the continuity of personnel, getting to know him, understanding what he wanted, and he let us do what we wanted, was a great combination. So for most of the first, I was there 30 some years, the first 20 some years, that group of 10 stuck together. And I think we were early days of the tennis and this golf business and the global sports marketing business. And to be able to keep the management team together gave us a huge advantage as we, flew around the world trying to build sports business.
Well, as you flew around the world building the sports business, it was a group of very significant leaders amalgamating businesses that I guess you could argue had never been put together before in this vertically integrated context. Did you ever think it wasn't going to work?
Well, I think we thought parts of it weren't going to work, but we actually started out as we were agents, right? Mark had Arnold and Jack and Gary Player, and then Tiger and Greg Norman. And so he was an agent to begin with. I started out, and luckily in the beginning I had Björn Borg and Vitas Gerulaitis and McEnroe, and then Agassi, Sampras, and Courier, and Billie Jean, and Martina, and Chris Evert. So we all started out as agents, but we all seem to have a desire to want, what else can we do? This sports business is exploding, and we can do more than just be agents. We were selling sponsorship for our clients. Why not sell sponsorship for events? They all wanted to be on TV. Why not look at selling television rights for the Wimbledons and the US Opens and the British Opens around the world? So we actually went step by step for a while. It got faster as we got bigger, but we took our time in the early days, didn't take big risks till later on when we started buying tennis tournaments like the Miami tournament from my friend Butch Buckle.
Right.
It was a step-by-step progression. So later on, we started taking bigger risks. So we thought we knew the business from the agent side better than anybody, that we ought to be able to do the event side and the television side. It turned out we could. And we were early. We were the first movers in most of the world. We did get criticized for being the big guys an awfully long time, but we kind of liked it. It meant we were doing well.
What was the tipping point when the industry began to see you as a threat that they should take seriously, get out of the way, or at least try to deal with you?
We did become the 800-pound gorilla in a lot of these areas, and and then it becomes a little tougher. But when we started growing in the 70s and 80s, we had good competitors in each sport. We had good competitors in each territory, in the US and UK and Japan and Germany, but we didn't have anybody that was putting it all together. So it turned out we ended up being the big guys with a lot of little competitors. So then you're right, being the 800-pound gorilla, a lot of people take shots at you. And, I think that played well for me, because I just generally was a pretty nice guy. I wasn't a cocky guy. And so I think a lot of our customers and clients like dealing with me because they saw maybe a smaller, lower key guy in a really high charging industry. And so I was a competitive guy, but a much lower key guy than some of the others. So I think that played well for me. And it certainly, we did get criticized for being the big guys an awfully long time, but we kind of liked it. It meant we were doing well.
Well, and that led me, segue-wise, to my next question about Bob Kain stylistically. You taught me once, try to be nice. And then 10 minutes later, after I tried and failed, it was like, go back to the way you normally were. It's a failed work in progress. Won't even work. It doesn't work for some people. Certainly didn't work for me. Look at the skill set that you have and kind of describe what it took to be as successful as you've been, IMG and elsewhere. Entrepreneurialism, finance, is it law? Is it knowing politics? Is it marketing? Or is it maybe it's psychology?
Well, when I was an agent for a lot of these stars, trying to define those characteristics, you can't go to business school and get what is necessary. You could have a psychology master degree. You could have a business degree. Having a tennis degree or a golf degree probably is helpful. So that you were a jack of all trades. I think you needed to be a good listener, but you have to be yourself to a large degree. And whatever these businesses are, that, Rick, better than I do. You can't try and be someone you're not. So, just try to be myself. I do think you need to be really competitive. And I grew up being a competitive tennis player. I became a competitive senior golfer. I was always competitive. And but that doesn't mean you need to be arrogant or anything but trustworthy. So some of that combination, it played well. And I think it helped me in a bigger organization. If you were your own guy, you have to be a little bit of everything. I could play off of some of the other parts of IMG that were doing well and maybe seen as a little more cocky. So I think that I played well within the organization, internally and externally. But I thought after 30-some years, I'd been given such a blessing to have such a career in sports, I should give back, and my later passion was golf.
Sports Business Handbook, which is being released, but re-released. There it is. Bob wrote what I think, and I will say this to everybody, one of the best chapters in there. It's an honor not only to you and IMG, but obviously to Mark McCormick as well. And we all understand that. But one of the things that you said in there, and we'll refer to a couple of other themes, said don't wait for anybody, don't wait for anyone. That was one of your terms, and part of what I guess that means is, define your vision, get out there, figure out what it is, and have the moxie to deal with it. So you leave IMG and talk about the transition or work with the USGA, which hits home now given the major season we're in.
Yeah, I spent 31 years at IMG, which is way longer than I ever thought I'd spend in one place. So that was a full career, and Mark passed away. I became co-CEO, and then the family and the trustees they had a fiduciary responsibility, sold it to a private equity firm, and after 30 some years, I felt that was enough. I had a good friend, Randy Lerner, who owned the Cleveland Browns. He talked me into help him buy Aston Villa in the English Premier League, and then become vice chair briefly for the Browns. So I helped him do that. And then I actually went to CAA after my non-compete. The president of CAA, which was the biggest Hollywood agency, wanted to get into the sports business. And he liked our model of doing more than just clients. And so I actually worked with him a lot before and just became friends. So he asked me to come and help them in the design and architecture of their sports business, which has turned out pretty well. I did that for a couple of years. USGA came and said, would you consider going? And by then I'm a golfer, right? I'm a scratch golfer. I'm playing senior amateur tournaments. And they asked me if I could interview to be on the executive committee. And, and I knew all these governing bodies pretty well, having represented most of them in golf and tennis. And we were hard charging guys. They were much more blue blazer, good, nice guys. So, but I thought after 30 some years, I'd been given such a blessing to have such a career in sports, I should give back. And my later passion was golf. I'd done my tennis thing. So I thought, you know what, I should do that. And I'm really glad I did. I spent 4 years on the executive committee, and I think I helped a lot in terms of the business side and how they should, because of my sponsorship, television, and event background. Also, the way they deal with the athletes. I think they were a little bit afraid to deal with the athletes. And so I think my expertise did help. And I had a wonderful time, met wonderful friends who were all wildly passionate about the sport of golf, varying degrees of expertise and knowledge. But it was a great chapter for me, and I felt like I really did give back, which was fun to do.
Well, but you had the expertise, not only, give back, but the vision has taken it to a next step where a Mike Wan can take seamlessly to the next step after that. The championships, we have a women's open, a men's open. We have youth golf that's being developed in like nobody's business. The big issue to me, or to a lot of people listening, is the whole notion of governance. You have 4 majors run by 4 different organizations. The simple, naive question would be, do you all get along? But can the majors world and then everybody else, we'll talk about the Saudi tour later, but the majors world, can they operate the way it's currently configured? And if not, how do you change it?
Well, I think, forget the Saudis for a second. The 4 Grand Slams are independent, actually both in golf and tennis. And then the men's tour and the women's tour are 2 independent tours. I think golf has done a great job. And then you have the European tour as well as the U.S. tour in golf, a bit of an Asian tour as well. But the 2 primary tours were the U.S. and European and men's. And so I think they meet regularly, those different elements. And I think they get along overall pretty well. The RNA and the USGA combine to make the rules of the game and the handicapping of the game. So they have to get along because they've agreed that for the best interest of the global sport of golf, they should get along. But I do think they do a pretty good job. They're much less feisty than I watched the tennis world do it with the 4 Grand Slams and the men's and women's governing body. I think golf has done that pretty effectively and built 2 And we had a lot to do with the building of the European tour, which is now the global tour, if you will, outside the U.S. So I think they've done a pretty great job with it overall. And they all get along and they think about what's best for the game. I'd give pretty high marks, especially for governing bodies, which tend to have turnover and can be a little dysfunctional. I'd say golf has done a really good job. And they give back millions and millions of dollars to local communities. And there's no sport in the world that's ever set up that way. It's wildly unique and amazing. So, you know, I feel bad to see it being attacked.
Give me your overall take of where you think media is today. New media, old media, streaming media, and where it's going.
Well, you know, I gotta give you a little chronology. When I started IMG, there were 3 television networks in America, and most countries had one. The really go get 'em countries had 2, right? And most of them were government owned. So when we started selling international television rights, we were selling to governments, and we had 2 or 3 choices, and sports was Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon on TV. So then we go through this wild period. You know, ESPN, nobody will watch 24/7 sports, and then ESPN2, then ESPN News, and then Golf Channel. No one will watch golf 24/7. So even us leaders in the sports didn't even think that would happen. So that was pretty cutting edge. But now, you know, there's a network for everything. And maybe ESPN is just that's how old I am. Now ESPN was cutting edge. It may be a dinosaur. You know, maybe all getting it through this thing that we're doing right now. And it may just all be direct consumer, but, you know, I hope I'm still around to see it, but cable might even be pretty ancient.
Who pays for the media in the future, especially the streaming stuff? How do we monetize? Advertisers continue to see the value because there's a unique way to measure it?
I think we keep paying and advertisers keep paying. Yeah. They just, you know, I think it's still the same people paying. It's just different forms. It may be lots more nickels and dimes and dollars rather than, you know, your $150 a month for all your cable and sports networks. But, you know, I'm the last guy to ask. I had my run, and now I just listen when I have dinner with my son. I don't talk about it too much.
Well, that's you know, and probably that's the right answer given his rapid rise in the industry. But that's another matter. So let me ask you this relative to what we see in the media these days. This whole Saudi-backed process. We saw it before with Greg and Fox. We see it now. It seems to be a little more real today. What's your take broadly?
You know, here as a fan, I'm disappointed because I think golf is a unique sport in the world of professional sports. What other sport, especially the U.S. Tour, is so organized and gives so much money back to charity? It is designed as a nonprofit, and every week I've been lucky enough to be on a couple of boards of different PGA tournaments, and they give back millions and millions of dollars to local communities. And there's no sport in the world that's ever set up that way. It's wildly unique and amazing. So, you know, I feel bad to see it being attacked, but, you know, life moves on and progress is progress. And courts of law don't look at companies that give back more than other companies to charity. So as far as this current thing, it's the first big threat. We had lots of these things in tennis. People were constantly thinking about blowing up the tour and starting new tours. Golf's been pretty staid and conservative. So this is a big thing for them. You know, I was very involved in a potential antitrust lawsuit when we were managing athletes and running events in tennis world. The tour has the ability and the right to set rules and guidelines. When it comes to court battles, courts start defining what is a reasonable set of rules for your tour. And that is a slippery, expensive slope. And I think they feel like their rules are reasonable. And I think Greg and the LIV think they're unreasonable. Big bloody fight probably going to happen, and we'll see what happens. But there's no slam dunk on either of this. And if I had to be a fortune teller, this will go for a while, maybe a year or 2 years, and then somebody will sit in a room and they'll carve out some weeks and they'll do some sort of settlement, because antitrust lawsuits, the results can really be ugly for everybody. So I've got a major on my record in senior amateur golf, which is, for an old tennis player, pretty good.
How does it feel when people come up to you and say, "Aren't you Tucker Kane's dad?"
I couldn't be more proud and couldn't be happier. It did happen pretty fast, actually.
Yeah, you have no problem with Dodger tickets. Now you have no problem with Fanatics merchandise. For those of you who don't know, he is quickly running up the corporate sports business ladder quicker than we ever did.
Well, he had great owners at the Dodgers that allowed him to build his own little internal private equity world in sports technology, which made him a cutting edge guy, which he got to know Michael Rubin, and Michael thought he knew what he was talking about. And now, I think he's in a wonderful spot at Fanatics. So yeah, hey, good for him. He doesn't need any allowance from his dad, I'll tell you that.
Quite clearly. Final question, and this one is serious. I read the bio and then I wanted to read it over and over again. You say you compete in these various senior tournaments, yet you're a +1. What does compete mean? I mean, have you won any of these tournaments yet? What's your deal?
Yeah, I actually, so I've got a major on my record in senior amateur golf, which is, for an old tennis player, pretty good.